Hey, welcome everybody to the weekly coaching call. This is going to be a party series because we are learning about push weeks and what it would look like to co-labor together. And I think push weeks have been the biggest tool in the tool belt that have helped us get momentum and also build relationship for a disciple making community than any other tool that we've used since the beginning of our journey. So, not only have we got momentum from it, but this is how we found the majority of our persons of peace. So if I had to put a quick definition on a push week, it's an all-in go nuts for a season. And that season could be a few days, it could be a week long, but it's praying, fasting, going out among the lost in a way that you couldn't sustain for the long term, but you could do it for a few days or for a week. And it gives you the opportunity to expand to places among the lost that you haven't gone yet. And I think push weeks are the number one way for casting vision because you get to rub shoulders with one another, you get to learn from one another. And it's not always about the persons of peace you find, the pops you find. That's a piece of it, but we've done push days, push seasons and weeks where we didn't have a lot of fruit among persons of peace, but what we did have is relationships that formed, boldness that rubbed off, and more tools and gifts that we've learned from one another in the process. And those will carry you on to the long haul. So I'm going to give you a little journey of our push weeks in the Pacific Northwest and even how that's affected disciple making community across the United States. Before I do that, though, I want to give a shout out to the whole Pacific Northwest disciple making community because they're going to be all over these pictures. They're going to be in the video clips throughout the series. And one of my goals is after today to have other people share more in this series than I do. So hopefully you guys can hold me accountable to that. But I want more people who have been a part of these and have been impacted by them to share over the next couple of weeks than I do. And here's the big goal for everyone. So I want you to write this down. We are praying that everyone would either participate in a push week or participate in one by the end of October 2024. Now, why October? Well, for most of us, depending on where you live, unless you're a pretty boy who lives in California or something like that, by October, the weather is getting kind of nasty. And it's much harder to do a push week and to host people and to go out among the lost. And so host one or participate in one by the end of October 2024. And hopefully this will become another tool in the tool belt, kind of like a prayer calendar, but it gives you something specific when we say, hey, how in the world are we going to see 1 million by 2024? I mean, by 2028. Well, we've been praying together. That's one tool. We've been doing prayer calendars and learning some of these rhythms. But I believe also one of the tools, this is a specific strategy that we can use, are push weeks. So I'm going to share my screen with you here, and hopefully it'll go full screen as well. And I'm going to take you on a little journey from 2020 to 2024 to today. So everybody give me a thumbs up if you can see this picture okay. Awesome. So all the way back to 2020, all right? This is the very first person of peace that we found. We had just been trained at the end of 2019. We began implementing it. At this point, we were still a multi-site church across 4 cities in Oregon, and COVID had just become a thing. And we'd already made a decision that we were going to relaunch into disciple making movements. And so the gal in the window there is Heather Lynn, and COVID had started, and she was the first person that I know of personally that got COVID in our kind of tribe. And so we went over and we were ministering to her, taking a meal and just loving on her. And she was super open to the things of God and to the principles that we were sharing about praying for her, sharing a story with her, and her sharing it with other people in her circle of influence. And so we said to Heather Lynn, hey, Heather Lynn, would you be willing to get your circle of influence together and begin going through DBS and do these stories from the Bible, the 10 stories of hope? And she was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if the people will do it. And we were like, well, just give it a try. So she had invited 7 people in her circle of influence to do this with her. And all of them said, Heather Lynn, if you're doing it, we're in. So she's like, okay, crazy. And she was messaging us all excited and stuff. Then she was like, by the end of the night, she had invited 17 people to join her for DBS. And I can't believe this, but this is true. All 17 of the people said, Heather Lynn, if you're leading it, we're in. So she got even more motivated. By midnight the next night, she had invited 37 people to join her DBS, and 34 of them said yes. So this is in March of 2020. This was the first 9 people who said yes to baptism. And this is in July of 2020. And so to watch them do Discovery Bible Study, to discover who Jesus was, the majority in this group had never believed in Jesus or followed Jesus. So not only did they believe in Jesus and choose to follow Jesus, now they're taking their first step of obedience to get baptized. And to watch Heather Lynn get to baptize these people was one of the most beautiful things that I had ever experienced in my life. And I was hooked, y'all. And this was kind of our first version of pressing into it. And I share this story because many of these people were a part of our very first mini push week, which was a total group of people of 17 that did our first push week. So it doesn't take a lot. And we did another mini push week with just the 9 people that I showed in that picture before. But we got to watch Heather Lynn get to baptize 17 of the original 34 that were in her Discovery Bible Study in 2020. And it was an amazing experience. So you can see these are some of the same people that were in that original photo. They're going out and doing a push week with us in September. So they started in March. Now they're going out among the lost. We're sitting in front of a pawn shop, and they are doing DBS with a guy that lives homeless on the street. And they're people who were originally in Heather Lynn's group are now doing Discovery Bible Study with this guy on the street. And they're doing what we were doing for them, which is a beautiful picture, which led us to beginning to do push weeks on a regular basis after COVID was no longer a thing. And this was the first time that people traveled from another city, and in this case, Atlanta, Georgia. They came all the way from Atlanta, and I think the very first time that people traveled to do a push week with us in Portland, there were these 4 guys, and I caught this picture of them getting to pray for a guy that they led to Jesus and got baptized that week as a part of that mini push week that was 3 days long. And so to give you a little example, then over time, these push weeks begin to grow, more people begin to join it. This is kind of a unique picture for me because if you scrolled really deep in here, you will see 2 guys over here named Lee Wood and Neil Cole, who just happened to be in the area when we were doing a push week. And as a multi-site pastor, I had to be honest with you guys. I've done a lot of repenting over this journey, but I had read a book by Neil Cole earlier in my church planting journey. And I was like, this guy is insane. And there's no way I'm going to do what he's going to do. And I got to hang out with him during this push week, and I had to repent to him one night because the Lord got a hold of my heart and said, hey, remember when you were speaking poorly about this brother? And now this is the same guy. And I put 2 and 2 together and recognized that I had to go to him and repent. So that was another thing that happened as a part of these relational communities that God was putting together. Then we started traveling to other cities in Oregon. So this is in Corvallis. You see Russ here. You see Wayne sitting over there. Joe Kimmel's down here. And we started co-laboring in deeper ways together as a team in the Pacific Northwest, which led us to even larger times where we come together and say, hey, we're going to spend 4 days going out among the lost together and rallying together in more than one city. So we would do Southeast Portland, we would do Southwest Portland, we would travel down the road a couple hours to Corvallis, and we would all begin living this out together, helping one another, spurring one another on, praying for one another, fasting together. And you can see like the numbers continued to grow, and we continued to find more persons of peace, which led to the Atlanta cruise sending more people to come to join us as we went out among the lost. And then they're kind of catching the vision for us. This is one of the guys from Atlanta. And I think ultimately this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 guys that flew from Atlanta to join us in our push week this last summer. So there was over 54 of us plus 14 guys from Atlanta and 8 people from other cities that joined us for 4 days to go out among the lost and to help us to co-labor. Now, what I love about this story is many of these same guys had such an amazing experience and caught the vision for it that right before we went to Augusta, Susie, they joined you all to do a push week in Augusta. So the same people who joined us in Portland joined Susie and had already experienced it and done it and got to come alongside them. And not only did they get to co-labor together, but God brought people together in the kingdom and even healed relationships through it within the body of Christ. And I think the beauty of this is you see that movement begins to happen along relational lines. It's more than a tool. It's about the relationships that we build with one another. And this is us co-laboring down in Corvallis, because this whole crew went down 2 hours away to another city while they were here in Portland to come alongside the team there. And you can see that through that push week this last summer, we had 311 spiritual conversations. We got to pray for 238 people in like 4 days. And we had 8 salvations, and we got to baptize somebody that was a part of that. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I also just want to show you, like you can see some more people from our coaching call here. This is in Seattle. So some of us went up to Seattle, walked with Anna, Monica, Hannah, Crystal, the whole crew that's up there. You can see Joe Kimmel in this picture from Corvallis. So now Corvallis people are up in Seattle, Portland people are up in Seattle, Seattle people are down in Portland, and we're all co-laboring together because we believe that movement happens, again, along relational lines. What was beautiful to me about going up there is, again, you can see this isn't a massive group of people. This is a group of brothers and sisters saying, hey, let's spur one another on. And while we were there, we got to see Monica, who's right here in the middle of this picture, meet this gal at one of the apartment complexes. And then the next day, get to go out and Monica gets to baptize somebody for the first time in her entire life. And what's amazing to me is that when you co-labor together, you get to experience together what Jesus has in store for all of us in the kingdom. And we recognize how much God can do when we are willing to partner with one another and not just build our own thing. And I think it's an amazing experience to live out these push weeks together, to see new Discovery Bible studies start, to see people get baptized, and to help one another get momentum. And you can see at the end of our push week up in Seattle, we had 42 spiritual conversations. We got to pray for 46 people. We had 1 gospel salvation. And then by the next day, we got to baptize actually 2 people. And this is just this last October. Then a group of us got back from India, and MK, one of the movement leaders, and his wife got to join us. This is in Wayne Shinseki's house out on the southwest side of Portland. And we are all coming together to share stories and to spur one another on here. And just excited to see what God's going to do as we continue to train more people and see more people co-labor together. And then you guys might recognize this one. This is what we just did in Augusta. So what I wanted to do today, before we break out into groups, is not only cast a vision for everybody being a part of or hosting your own push week by October 2024, but I want to give you some just like things to think about as you're processing that. Again, this is a tool, which is just a strategy that can help us take next steps. I know that my wife and I, Heather, is going with me up to New York the end of this month. And we're going to be with John and Kathy and a whole crew of disciple makers up there. And so it's Portland to New York. I know Jim's doing one in San Diego this summer. I know Anna's doing one in Seattle in September, I believe. And we're doing ours in Portland, August 7th through 11th. And I'm pretty sure anyone in these crews would welcome anyone to join us for any of these push weeks. But what I will say is that even more than joining somebody else's, you can also host one and we will help you. You know, if somebody's near you, we can come and be a part of it, and we can help coach you. We can tell you what we've learned, and we can co-labor in that way together. And I want you to recognize that push weeks can be done with 4 people. Jesus sent us out 2 by 2. See, we're supposed to celebrate that. and I think sometimes we think, oh, I've got to have 50 people to do a push week. No, you don't. You have to have 2 pairs of people who are willing to pray together, fast together, and spend an extraordinary extra amount of time co-laboring together and going out among the lost. And I think what's beautiful as we do that is that we'll spur one another on, and we'll see more movement begin to multiply through relational lines. And I think this is what Paul did. You read about this all through the New Testament, the book of Acts. You see story after story of Paul living this pattern out, whether it's in the synagogues or it's in the market, and going back to encourage even more movement and to see it. And I think in some ways it is like a push week. And our prayer is that especially those of you who are doing this alone, that by the end of 2024, that you are no longer doing it alone, that you have disciple-making community. And we believe that one of the tools God's led us to see that is being a part of a push week, hosting a push week, participating in it. And so my big takeaway for today is that would you begin praying about, during this series, before the series is over, scheduling the push week that you're going to be a part of by October of 2024. Again, it can be one you host, or it can be one that you participate in. And get it on the calendar, and get in your heart that I'm going to pray. I'm going to find people to do this with. I'm going to go, I'm going to listen, I'm going to learn, I'm going to pray. We're going to go out among the lost. And here's my other big encouragement. I'm going to share 2 scriptures, and then we're going to go into breakout groups. But in order to do this successfully, we've got to be willing to co-labor with people who don't do it exactly the way we do it. And one of my biggest encouragements to you is to recognize that it doesn't matter if it's Big Life or 2414 or No Place Left or what DMM stream it is. Drop the labels and collaborate, co-labor. Don't let a different set of disciple-making tools or methods keep you from co-laboring. Because it's these relationships and these relational lines that will help us get momentum, and we rub off on one another. And some of the things I've learned from my brothers and sisters in other streams have spurred us on to even greater fruit as we've pressed into it. And so 2 scriptures I want to share with you. One is Matthew 10:7-8, and it's Jesus saying this: as you go, proclaim this message, the kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. And then he says a really, really important phrase right here. Freely you have received, freely give. To me, that is one of the beautiful parts of Push Weeks. We have all freely received, and we need to give away to one another, to our brothers and sisters in Christ, to fellow disciple makers. Not only we've received, but we need to give it away. We need to learn from one another. We need to co-labor together. And I want to show you a picture of how Paul did this. And I've got to find where it went. Here we go. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you guys can see that okay again. You can see here that this is Paul's first journey. And it kind of maps the arrows of how he went around in disciple-making communities, spurring on the churches in each of these areas. And we have story after story from Paul's journeys of entire households coming to know Jesus and getting baptized. You read it multiple times in the book of Acts. Well, one of those stories that we have read before in our coaching groups is from Acts 16, and it's the story of the woman with the purple cloth, right? So on the Sabbath in Acts chapter 16, we went outside the city gate to the river where we expected to find a place to pray, and we sat down and began to speak to the women who were gathered there. And one of those listening was the woman in the city of Thyatira, however you say that, named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth, and she was a worshiper of God. And the Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. And when she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to her home. And she said, if you consider me a believer in the Lord, she said, come and stay at my house. And she persuaded us. Well, it was that house that they went back to spur other believers on later. And this is the second missionary journey. Boom, it grew. And now they're going from more cities to cities and spurring one another on, encouraging one another. In fact, it says after a time in Derb's Paul and Barnabas went back the way that they came, working their way through Lystra, Iconium, Pisidian, Antioch, Perga. In each city, it says they encouraged the believers there and strengthened their faith as they would continue doing through future missionary journeys. And you can see this is Paul's third missionary journey. And this is what I've learned from Push Weeks. If we will schedule them, go out of our way and sacrifice to be a part of them with one another. Recognize that it's not how large or how small they are, it's that we're co-laboring together and we're not just doing our own thing. I believe that our maps will look similar. Because this is my map. From Portland to Corvallis, up to Seattle, down with Jim in San Diego, to Lubbock, to Augusta and Atlanta, to Ithaca, to Chicago, and beyond. And I think that as we do this, we'll see teams cross across the United States. Like 15 guys from Atlanta went to Portland, and some of us from Portland went down to Augusta. And I think that we're better together when we choose that we are going to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples in community. And Push Weeks is one of the great tools that God will use to help us get momentum in the days ahead. So that's what I got for today.